Furious driving, proud to be supported by Diamond Bright, protecting, cleaning and caring for the Furious fleet and for yours, with 10% off using code FD10. Follow the links in the description below. So yes, Inspector Furious of the Yard here, reporting for duty in my 1960 Met Traffic Police Wolseley 699. As you know, I've grown up on a diet of full Crown Victorias in action movies and police films, and so I've been out and bought myself a police Crown Victoria. My friend Andrew, though, he grew up on a diet, well, Edgar Wallace, John Thor, in the days before he was Morse, being chased by policemen driving things like this. And that's sort of love for this particular make and model of car with my friend. So he went and sought out his dream car, which was this, the last of the big Wolseleys and the last of the Wolseley police cars really as well. So what is it? The Wolseley 699 was basically all new in 1959. It was a big step up from the previous generation. Three main things that stand out, and Autocar picked this out as well when they first reviewed it. First of all, it's no longer body on frame, it's a monocoque unitary construction chassis. It's got disc brakes at the front, they're servo assisted, and there's even, as Autocar pointed out, a bias valve for the rear drums, because that was actually something that was worth noting 65 years ago. And the engine capacity was now 2.91 litres, which is basically the same engine as a 3-litre Austin Healey. And notably, the styling of this thing is, well, it's rather pretty, isn't it? Because this is the Farina body, because it is the same Italian-inspired Pininfarina shell as you'll find in the Austin A99 Westminster, which is a little bit cheaper, and the Princess 3-litre, which is a lot more expensive, but all still the big Farina body. When you talk about the big Farinas, this is what you're talking about. And focusing on the styling, it is an imposing and beautiful car. We've got lots of details around the thing, like these peaked bezels around the headlamps, this nice crisp line running along the front wings. It's almost London taxi cab-like inserted bonnet on the top here, and the big grille, with of course the famous light-up Wolseley badge, which is a staple of the Wolseley going back to the very beginning. You also got lots of extras, which the Austin, being cheaper, didn't. These fog light spotlights were an optional extra on the Austin, standard on the Wolseley. It's interesting though seeing Morris Minor side lamp and indicator combinations down here as well. Along the side of the thing, we do of course have lots of very nice little details as well. And of course, where it steps up at the back, we go into these big fins, which on this side of the car looks really nicely balanced. The same thing is over on the 1560, the smaller version of the Wolseley. However, that smaller shell chassis doesn't quite carry it off as convincingly as this rather elegant, bigger shape, which even has a little kind of semi-spoiler built in to the back of the window. Now let's talk about the police history of this particular car. This is a genuine Met Police traffic car based out of London in the early 1960s. And it's an interesting period for policing because cars like this are proper ton-up cars. This thing could do a genuine 100 miles an hour. Wolseley claimed 97, 98 miles an hour. Autocar tested it to 101 or 102, so there's serious speed in there. You needed those disc brakes under the front. So you've got fast, powerful cars, but at the same time, we've got this fairly archaic police equipment. We've still got the Winkworth bell on the front of the thing, which is a lovely little thing, very cute. However, can you imagine this thing belting up the newly opened M1 at 95 miles an hour, chasing a stolen Mark II Jag full of bank robbers with gold in the boot, with his dinky little bell going tinkly clinker? Blues and twos didn't arrive until the mid-60s. There was a strange crossover period just after this car went into service where you had the two-tone yee-haw horn as well, which would be used for serious pursuit, and the bell for more little things, a less serious pursuit. Also, of course, we've got the police sign on the front. Our only police signage are these two removable, it turns out, police clip-on number plates, which aren't illuminated and are barely reflective. And the only light illuminating this thing is this little tiny, well, it's effectively a number plate light, which gives a tiny dim glow. So you've got this huge black car with, by the standard of the day, okay lights, but pretty awful in reality, illuminating its police presence on a non-reflective number plate by a tiny light bulb. It's hilarious. But because this is a traffic car, this is the one that goes after the bad guys fast, we've got the loud hailer on the roof, so this is quite impressive kit. But things get more interesting when we go inside. So, climbing aboard, things are a little bit different from what you'll find in the civilian version of the Wolseley 699, because a famous big selling point of the Wolseley over the Austin is the fact you get real, genuine leather and you get specially selected, highly polished wood. The police, though, could not be seen to be driving a car as luxurious as that. Why are our tax shillings being wasted on such frivolities when the boys in blue should be spending it on important equipment? So, the police actually spent more having cars taken off the production line and specifically decontented with cheaper versions of the equipment than if they'd been and bought them off the forecourt. So instead of having our fine leather, we've got vinyl wipe clean seats, and it is a big bench seat, 6-seater car effectively. And up front, instead of our specially selected highly polished wood, we've got the tin dash from the base model Austin. So although it's the metal dashboard, we do still have the basic controls from the Wolseley. We've got our light controls on individual switches for side lights and headlights over here on the right. We've got our choke just here, our ventilation controls up here. We do have a very nice analog clock, but spread out amongst all the rest of it, we do have a lot of specific police equipment. Notably, of course, an exemplary tea shelf, ideal for a cup of tea from a thermos flask, tartan pattern of course, and sandwiches wrapped up in wax paper by your wife, because it's 1960. Up here on the tea shelf during refs. In the centre of the dashboard, no radio. Believe it or not, the radio was actually an option even on the Wolseley, so a blanking plate was standard, but the police have gone for a cubby hole, which is a useful place of putting notebooks, I don't know, whatever else, whistles, tiny truncheons. What else did the police use in those days? Small things, basically. But notably, this car would have been twin crewed. There'd been a driver who was in charge of keeping the car on the straight and narrow and keeping that needle near the top of the dial. And secondly, there'd be a spotter whose job was to keep an eye on everything else around the car and keep an eye on other things that were going on. Because on the left-hand side of the car, we've got a second mirror, so that spotter can keep an eye on what's going on behind the car as well. We've only got one mirror in the centre and one wing mirror over there. The police wouldn't spring for two mirrors on the outside of the car, shockingly. Not that the wing mirrors really do very much anyway. But a large part of the passenger's job was, of course, to operate these radios. First of all, of course, is this beautiful Pi walkie-talkie. I love the colour scheme, this kind of pale baby blue and the little button on top. The red cable is just delightful. It looks like a fairly sizable unit, but in fact there's an awful lot more of this in the boot. There's basically a hi-fi separate amplifier type thing sitting in the back of the car. We've got squelch, off, RX and SBY and volume. And this is for keeping in contact with bass and other cars around you. This is a rather lovely device. And secondly, you have a second item here, which is of course for the loud hailer on the roof, so you can tell the public to disperse or shout to them that you need to pull over immediately because they've been doing something rather naughty. But this is the job of the passenger seat. You'll notice there is a number on the dashboard, 1005T. This is the car's call sign, its code number.
Hi, want to hand me the mic? Thanks a lot. Hi, this is car, what number are we? 55. Car 55. We're in a truck.
And that is mirrored over here on the speedometer. Now you notice this is not a standard speedometer and it's angled towards the passenger. There are two reasons for this. First of all, the passenger needs to be aware of how fast they're going. So when he's giving reports, he can see this clearly to give a report of where they are and how fast they're going. And also, if he has to record that detail, he knows it straight away. It also has the call sign 1005 Tango on the glass as well. That's why it's angled over there. But why is it such a big thing that's not the car's standard issue item? It's because this is a calibrated speedo. This is super accurate and it has to be calibrated by the police garage every so often in order for it to be admissible evidence in court as well. If you look at photos of other police cars, they always have this big dial. More often than not though, it is actually separate to the car's actual speedometer so that the driver can see what the car thinks it's doing and what the calibrated thing thinks it's doing, which can be useful to know. Under the radio gap, we've got a speaker for the Pi walkie-talkie. We have a small lamp just to keep an eye on things so you can see what's going on in the dark. And we have a big torch. This is such a 1960s item. It looks like it's something out of Scooby-Doo or the Thunderbirds. You could also use that for walloping people if your truncheon is out of action. And on the floor, another delightful item, a genuine period pumpy fire extinguisher. I'm not sure how much good that would do these days, but it's a fantastic item to still have. Now, as I say, this car was a genuine serving traffic car in the Met, and it's been through a number of collections, so all the equipment is authentic and correct. The last owner was actually a retired policeman who had a collection of police cars and knows what this stuff should look like, so he made sure it's all authentic and correct. Now, moving around the car, as well as the vinyl seats, we've also, instead of the plush carpet we would have, like in my Crown Victoria, we've got wipe clean rubber floors. So if you stomp in with dirty boots, you can wipe it clean. If you have passengers in the back who are slightly worse for wear and they decide to unconsciously couple from their breakfast, it's all easy to clean, although apparently a lot of cops said when these cars were getting towards the end of their working life, you'd climb in and all you could smell was sick in the back seats. No matter how many times it had been cleaned, it just wouldn't come out, which is not pleasant. Now looking above us, we've got these rather lovely Art Deco-y courtesy lights on the A and B pillars, but above that, we've got the headlining. Fairly normal, you might say. However, this one's got a zip in it. This is not a normal thing unless it's an ex-police car. And a good way of telling whether you're driving or sitting in an ex-police car from this era is the zip in the headlining, because this was used to access the equipment in case it needed updating, repair, that kind of thing. If you ever climb into a strangely pale blue Morris Minor or a curiously white Wolseley, then have a look at the ceiling, and that's a dead giveaway. It was once a police car. Now in front of the driver we have of course got an enormous steering wheel with no power steering. This will become very apparent when we hit the road in a minute. And this particular car has only got 2 pedals. Wolseley's came with the BMC 3 on the tree with overdrive or 4 on the floor. But this one, because of traffic duty and sort of patrolling around the towns to save on clutch wear, because they did find they were burning through clutches quite a lot in those days, you'll find that the police P6s also tended to be automatic as well for reliability reasons. This has got the Borg Warner BW35 with overdrive apparently, so a 3-speed auto, which is pretty awful. And this switch just here is an intermediate range, which is even worse. Now one thing you might have noticed about these cars is how high the ceiling is, and that's because back in the 50s and 60s everyone wore a hat, a proper hat at that as well, and there's plenty of room for your fedora to fit in the car quite happily without even brushing the top if you're a tall chap. If you find yourself unlucky enough to be in the back of one of these things, you're actually fairly comfortable. I mean, you can see why the civilian populace would be enjoying this as a mid-range luxury car. Big comfy bench seat, lots of legroom, lots of footroom, lots of headroom, but like in the front of the car we do have rubber floor mats so you can wipe the vomit out nice and easily. You do have vinyl seats, however, and this is quite interesting, you'll notice the door cards, vinyl carded. They should have wooden cappings in the civilian cars. The police didn't get the wooden cappings. You just get a little metal door pull, you get a little door handle, and you get a manual window winder, exposed screws, and in the front of the car, the ashtrays in the front should be in the door card itself. Autocar actually said the driver's one was completely useless because it was so penned in by other things you couldn't open it and use it, but that's by the by, you didn't get one, you didn't get a lighter either. But here in the back of the police car, I guess this is in case you're going to be taking the chief superintendent to a parade or something, you do have a pair of ashtrays which have been used extensively by the look of them. You also get a fold down armrest, so if you're an unpleasant little scrote and you're being taken down to the cells, you can at least arrive in comfort and style. One thing I do notice about sitting back here is when you sit back in the chair, this seat post really is quite claustrophobic and closes in on your view of the world around you. And one rather nice little accessory this car has, which is, as far as the owner can tell, an authentic addition to the car, is the demister pad in the back window, which is a stick-on pad which basically gives you a clear view through the centre of the screen on cold and frosty mornings. Now here under the bonnet we'll find this big green rocker cover, which will be familiar to anyone who's ever looked under the bonnet of an Austin Healey, because this is the C series, the 2.9 litre straight 6, which is a beautiful sounding, creamy delivering big lump of torque. Now this thing makes 102.5 bhp and 158 foot-pounds of torque. Now Wolseley claimed, I'm going to stop here and say quickly, that Wolseley is quite a hard word to say, so often just mumble it into Wolseley. I realise the correct pronunciation is Wolseley, but that's a very slow thing to say. So as I've said on every previous Wolseley video, I was going to say Wolseley and just be done with it. Wolseley claimed 0 to 60 in 17 seconds. However, Autocar managed to hustle one of these things up to 60 in just over 14 and a bit. So it can be pushed pretty hard, and it's a lovely, lovely engine with the twin SUs here on top. Right, let's take this thing out on the road and see what our motorists from 60 years ago were dealing with. So, handbrake is on the right of the bench seat. Obviously being a bench seat, unless you have an umbrella, no other choice. And the brindle appears to be almost in reverse psychologically, although I'm sure it's not. So our dynamo light just wiggling there. Let's flick some lights on down these dark little lanes. Now, We do appreciate the hydraulic Lockheed brakes when we meet big traffic like that coming the other way. I was about to talk about the brakes, and that was demonstrated it for us quite ably. Now, I'm quite a fan of the 3 on the tree column shift, but the old Borg Warner, which I'm not a fan of in the Rover, does make driving something that's a bit of a handful a little bit easier. Now, this is a talking point just here. This is the indicator. This was deeply unpopular with reviewers at the time, because not only is it a little bit fiddly, it does self-cancel, but this is your horn ring just here. Or a deep and imposing pop that tells the wrong uns to get out the way. If you're indicating and turning, these are very close to each other. You can actually trap your finger between the two, and that would really, really hurt. So a little bit of an oversight just there. And when it comes to turning the wheel, you're going to be doing it quite a lot. It's 4 whole turns lock to lock, and no power steering. I guess because no power steering, which does mean though that as you wrestle through a corner, you're having to twirl the wheel quite extensively. When you look at those old black and white B movies and you see the police driver spinning the wheel frantically and sliding side to side on the seat because they didn't have seat belts like I have now, this has been retrofitted, they really were working the car that hard. And of course, on radial tyres as it would have been, the thing would have been floating and rolling all over the place. The noise of the car is quite beautiful though. That crisp 6-cylinder growl is a delight to hear. Now, although the car was cutting edge and modern in 1959 when it came out with those fins, the chrome, the Americana, it was still deeply traditional under the skin, despite being a monocoque chassis, of course, because it's an inline 6, longitudinally mounted, rear-wheel drive with a live rear axle, a solid rear axle with cart springs, although it does have double wishbones and coils at the front, so it handles relatively well. It was actually considered quite a stiff riding car for the day when reviewers first got their hands on it. But Wolseley customers were some of the most loyal in the business, and so they knew their market and they kept things, well, as they had been to a certain extent, modernising where they could, keeping things the same where they felt they would keep the customer base happy. So even though we're only doing 30 miles an hour, we will pitch into this corner with a bit of a lean. An extra you mightn't have noticed here on the dashboard is the ammeter. This was added by the police garage or for the police spec, just to keep an eye on things with all the extra police equipment that's working hard to make sure the battery is charging when you're running fast with the radio running and the bell are ringing. Right, and I'm back onto a bigger road to see the blistering performance of 0 to 60 in double figures. Another thing that will hurt you, as well as the indicator, is this door pull, which is right beside your elbow, and every time you spin the wheel or go to look over your shoulder, you crack your funny bone into it, and it really, really hurts. And it's very, very tight. I imagine this is differently placed from the civilian car, because no one would put up with that. Now, Wolseley's and the police did have a long, long relationship going all the way back to, well, the 1930s, really. In the old days, if you saw a black Wolseley lurking in the distance, you watched your step, because it may well be the long arm of the law up to keeping you in check. So why did the police, who are obviously budget conscious, select the Wolseley version rather than the Austin, which cost a few quid more? Well, the thing is, the police spec'd lots of the extras onto the thing, like the spot lamps. The Wolseley version came with a lot of the extras you had to pay extra for on the Austin version, so by buying the Wolseley, you actually got a cheaper version. Then, of course, they did their crazy decontenting, which cost more than the standard car, but there you go, that's budgets for you. Now, this was, of course, a police pursuit car, a police interceptor, if you will, back in the day. So let's get us up to a whole blistering 50 miles an hour. Okay, 30 miles an hour on this bit. Now, can you imagine being sat in this car for 8 hours a day with your partner, keeping an eye on the City of London, protecting it from the ne'er-do-wells and criminal gangs who are inflicting fear on the populace? It's relatively comfortable seat, but not the most ergonomically perfect because it's very upright, and I can imagine it would actually start giving a bit of a back pain, not to mention the clonking of the elbow on the side just there. And your best ventilation really is from your quarter lights in all four windows. Kick down, and as with every Borg Warner BW35, the engine gets very loud and the speed does not increase. Ah, don't you love a BW35? This does have a particularly rubbish feature called intermediate hold, which means it stays basically in the top two gears. You start in the top gears and you kind of stay there. I'm not really sure what the point is. Ooh, Bremont watches. A good chance to, ooh, like a Volvo, a good chance to show a big feature, big selling point of the car. 2-speed wipers. This was, as I say, a selling point. Are they self-parking as well? My word, they are. How exciting. As we lurch through the side windows going round a roundabout. So this is the 1960 Wolseley 699. This was upper middle class, upper middle management luxury of the day. Imagine a Granada, but a little bit posher, maybe £200 more at the time. How appropriate, we are now stuck behind a John Lewis truck. This is the Volvo V90 of its day, the big police interceptor cruising the streets. In fact, it's rumoured that the styling of the front of this actually influenced the 1960s Volvos. If you've enjoyed this, please, as always, hit like and subscribe, and join us again next time driving something completely different.